Hi, my name is Roger. Welcome back to my channel. In the video today, I'm going to be looking at harvesting strategies. So you are an entrepreneur or you may be thinking about going into entrepreneurship. This video is for you. What I'm going to be discussing here are a number of strategies you can employ as an entrepreneur to reap the benefits of your business later on. So watch through to the end. Also, the video is also targeting those persons who are studying entrepreneurship. So you're doing an entrepreneurship course. This is for you also. It contains information which most definitely will be on any entrepreneurship course. Alright, so let's jump right into the video. What really is harvesting strategies? So you may be wondering. Well, harvesting, think about the farmer. Think about the crops and what happens when the farmer harvests his or her crop or crops. When this is done, it is that that individual actually reaps the ripened items, so they would have been fit, ready to be harvested, and that is what the farmer does. Similarly, as it relates to entrepreneurship, when the business will get to this business, of course, will go through different life cycles. It will get to that point where it then becomes quite successful, and the entrepreneur may be seeking or thinking, where do I go from here? And this is it. This is where the ideas are as to how you would navigate that period in the business. So it is an entrepreneurial activity, so it is a natural part of the life of any entrepreneurial venture. And what it does is that it seeks to reap the benefits of the business. It may also be viewed as an exit strategy. So the entrepreneur may use this now as that route to get out of the business. That is what it means, it being an exit strategy. Where harvesting is concerned, it may be induced by one of two reasons. So one, the choice to harvest may be as a result of macro factors. Now, these are essentially variables in the environment, so they are outside of the realm of our span of control of the entrepreneur. It really are those variables which impacts pressure upon the entrepreneur and forces the entrepreneur now to have to close the business. Look, for instance, at the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. That there are many businesses, small businesses in particular, that would have gone under as a result of the various negative variables associated with it. So there would have been many persons who would have been out of a job, for instance. By virtue of that, they would not have had any money, or they had to cut back on their spending, and that of course would have reduced the sales, and in many instances significantly, of the typical entrepreneurial venture. That in itself now would cause them to go out of business, because they would get to the point where they have to make a decision that decision to close the business. So those are macro factors. So these are now factors that are outside of the control of the entrepreneur. On the other hand, we have those micro factors, and these now are those strategies that are employed and deployed by the entrepreneur because he chooses to do so. So there are no variables, no external variables that impacts the decision here now to harvest the business. The first strategy, two strategies we're going to be looking at are mergers and acquisitions, and these are a natural part of any entrepreneurial venture. I'm going to begin by talking about mergers. A merger essentially is that integration of two ventures. When a merger takes place, what happens is that a new company is formed. So there is no longer existing the legal identities of the previous two entities. You have two ventures merging, and having merged, a new entity is formed, a new legal entity that is formed. Typically, mergers are voluntary. That means the managing directors, CEOs of the two separate entities prior to merging would have sat down or would have decided on this way forward. Also, when a merger takes place, as I just alluded to, the fact that a new venture is formed, they also put in place a new management structure. There are different types of mergers. So we have vertical and horizontal mergers. Where a vertical merger is concerned, no, it is where you have two entities that are at two different levels. For instance, you may have an entity that, let us say, is, as I mentioned, farming earlier. You may have an entity that is, say, a farm merging with, let us say, a supermarket. So they are engaged in two different levels in the production process. The benefits of merging are quite astronomical. They are quite far-reaching. So we have cost savings, for instance, because particular activities of the business can be consolidated. The typical thing that comes from a merger or acquisition is, yes, consolidation and economies of scale. They can also maintain quality control. So just imagine now, you have, let us say, a farm, and you merge with a supermarket or a packaging company. You can, by virtue of merging with this packaging company, for instance, you would then have direct control over how the quality of service and the packaging and all related factors concerned there, as it relates to quality control. You now have direct control over that process, as opposed to having to rely on the integrity then of that entity if both you and that entity were not merged. And that too is to really improve on your brand quality. Also, in such a situation, it means that you are better able to protect your proprietary property, your intellectual property. Secondly, there is also horizontal integration, and where horizontal integration takes place, it is that these two entities now, they are at the same level of a particular industry. So you may have, for instance, let us say, two supermarkets merging, or two entities engaged in the distribution process merging, or two entities engaged in packaging merging. When this happens, competition is reduced, and this too is a perfect way. It's a great way to wipe out your competition, or to impact your competition significantly. It also creates greater market dominance, because by virtue of you combining with another entity, especially if it is the other entity that you're seeking to merge with, if they are a significant player in the market, what it means is that after the merger, this new entity will be much greater force to reckon with. And of course, as mentioned earlier, economics of scale. Where acquisitions are concerned, it is where you have a business, a venture that purchases all of or a significant portion of another company's share. So it may be that the purchasing company, they purchase all of the entity, or they may purchase shares in the company amounting to 50% or more. Now, when that happens, it means that this entity now has a greater leverage in the business. They have greater control over the decision making in the business. So yes, this is a perfect way to gain control of a company. And an acquisition may be friendly or it may be hostile. Friendly meaning that the company seeking to acquire the other, and the entity that is actually acquired, the representatives, managing directors, CEOs of both entities may sit down and say, okay, all right, we agree on this, and we want this to take place. So you may have that taking place, and that now will be a friendly acquisition. You may also have another situation where the acquisition may be hostile. It may be that over a period of time, for instance, the parent company, the company that buys out the subsidiary, that they secretly, should I say secretly? I don't know if it would be a secret, but over a period of time, they continue to acquire shares in the subsidiary company, and this may be happening, and the subsidiary may not even be realizing what is happening until they probably just look one day and realize that the parent company, as in the holding company, has a significant share ownership in them. All right. Now, where an acquisition takes place, when it takes place, you still have both entities maintaining separate legal identities. So no, this is where now it differs from a merger, because when a merger takes place, the merger produces a new business. So the two entities before would cease to exist legally. With the acquisition, the company that is doing the purchasing, and they're referred to as the holding company, they remain as a separate legal entity, and also the subsidiary, which is the company that is bought, would also maintain its legal identity. So nothing changes there in that respect. It is just that the ownership, who owns the business, is what changes. There are different types of acquisitions. There are horizontal, vertical, and conglomerate acquisitions. With a horizontal acquisition, it is that one entity acquires, for instance, its competitor. So they are in the same line of business. They do the same thing. So for instance, think about a bank purchasing another bank, or a supermarket purchasing another supermarket. That is a different brand supermarket, another chain. Vertical integration now is where they would be at different levels in the supply chain system. I'd mentioned earlier the supermarket and the farm, for instance. Conglomerate now is where the holding company acquires a subsidiary that is unrelated, is participating in a type of business which is unrelated to what the purchasing company does. So there's no correlation there, and this now is what gives rise to what is referred to as a conglomerate. And of course, we would have entities like Grace Canadian Company Limited, that is one of our powerhouse conglomerates here in the Caribbean and in Jamaica in particular. The benefits of acquisition are quite significant. Economies of scale, again, is a significant benefit. There is also increased customer base. The fact now that you have taken over another company, it means that you will be extending your customer reach. Also, as is expected, the market share would increase. It also lowers the risk of market entry. So you may be seeking to get into a particular market. Let's just say you're seeking to go and get into a market in, say, Africa. So you're in the Caribbean, as Grace Canadian Company Limited did a few years ago. They would have taken up some interest in over there in one of those African countries. Now, rather than you building from scratch, starting from scratch in that nation, African nation, you may identify an entity there and just purchase that entity because it already exists. They would already resonate with the people on the ground, and so this no be better than coming in, people don't know you, and trying to set up shop. There is also business diversification, and we see this played out perfectly as it relates to Grace Canadian and Company Limited. That entity, as a conglomerate, they own over 120 plus subsidiaries. And of course, market penetration. Market penetration is somewhat related to what I mentioned here when I spoke about increasing the market share. So this can really help you, well, rather lower risk of market entry. So it actually enables you, as I said, to get into particular markets. Now, what are some reasons for mergers and acquisitions? You may be wondering. Well, you want to grow the company. So you want to increase your market share and dominance. You want to become a dominant player in the market. And so, this is a strategy that the entity would typically engage in. Also, it may be to expand into new segments, as I mentioned with the Grace Kennedy African nation situation a little earlier, and also there is increased savings. So this is quite significant. This is what we talk about when we talk about economies of scale, because know that you have acquired another entity. It means that you can consolidate activities, you can purchase in bulk, and all of these things now can lead to increased savings. Next on the list is, as we look at harvesting concepts, harvesting strategies, is the absorption of new concepts. And this now is where typically you find that the entity thinking about the way forward, what they seek to do is to just revolutionize the business, and this is by typically introducing new and significant technology in the business, and this is to take up new opportunities. Look at NCB. They started over 10 years ago to revamp to overhaul their banking activities, and this is through the introduction of technology. So they would have had those kiosks that they use, and the kiosk essentially replaces the tellers and the services that the tellers used to offer. So where we are now, there are many branches. NCB, by the way, if you are not familiar with if you're from outside of Jamaica, not familiar with the National Commercial Bank, NCB, it is one of it is Jamaica's largest bank, and it is a bank that is native to Jamaica. So they started over 10 years ago introducing this new technology, and we are at the stage now where they have downsized significantly in terms of staff complement. They have also consolidated their activities across the banks. They would have closed a number of branches. Some branches are now also cashless, and they would have regionalized that activity. So if you are doing cash transactions, for instance, what they do is that they point you to a regional bank, based on where you're located geographically. So yes, we see this being introduced, technology, and it revolutionizes the entity, and this comes in the form of things like artificial intelligence, AI, robotics, e-commerce platforms being introduced. The benefits of absorption of new concepts is quite significant. The bank, for instance, using again National Commercial Bank, they most likely would be experiencing now and in years to come, significant savings, considering that by virtue of reducing their staff complement by, well, I recall that in 2021, I believe it may have been 2021 or 2020, June, thereabout, one of those years, they had made redundant 120 plus staff members. And even leading up to then, they would have also made redundant a number of staff and positions. They would have basically, taken out some of the positions. Of course, there would have been less need for particular supervisors and managers to, as a result of flattening the hierarchy of the organization. So there are a lot of cost savings there in terms of their operational cost. Their working capital cost would be significantly reduced. The third on the list of harvesting strategies is licensing of rights, and this now is where you have the venture giving the right to another entity or entities to use their intellectual property. We see this being played out a lot. For instance, we are now on the brink of the World Cup football, FIFA World Cup football. So it starts tomorrow, Sunday. Yes, and guess what? The thing with FIFA is that they would have given this entity, this software development company, EA Sports, exclusive rights to use their brand, that is FIFA, in these sporting games. Also, we see Disney, for instance, selling various licenses through to various interests across the world. Starbucks would have, sold the right exclusively to Nestle to distribute their brand and related products right across the globe. So Nestle is the one, they have exclusive rights to do that. Now, there are different types of licensing rights. For instance, it may be for a specific time, it may be for geographical regions, it may be exclusive or non-exclusive. Let me just comment on each here. So as it relates to time period, it may be, let me just say before I proceed, let me just add to that where the licensing right is concerned. Here in the Caribbean, we tend to rely a lot, are used to, on cable TV. And this now, things have somewhat changed. So we are in an era now where a lot of persons would be subscribing to entities like Netflix. But prior to that, a lot of persons would have been into cable TV. And these entities in the USA and other countries, the HBOs and Fox and so forth, that is what they do too. They sell the right to media houses across the globe to be able to broadcast their transmissions. So that is another example there of licensing right coming into play. Yeah, so back to types of licensing right. So we have time period, and this is where the license is for a specific period, or it may be for geographical regions. For instance, as I just mentioned, as with the cable televisions from those media houses, it is that in a lot of situations, the transmission is for particular regions. Notice too that even as it relates to certain content online, based on where you are, based on where I am geographically, you may not have access to particular content. Also, it may be, the licensing right may be exclusive or non-exclusive. So if it is exclusive, it means that only one player has the legal right to distribute that product, as we see so often in sporting coverages. The other thing too is that we see it play out We see it play out in franchises. So here in Jamaica, we have Restaurants of Jamaica that operates, I believe, the KFC and the Burger King brands. And the benefits is that the licensing company, they are able to collect royalties. It also helps to promote their brand, and it also gives them the ability to enter new markets. So this is a form of market penetration. Next is, as a harvesting strategy, number 4, is the entrepreneur, you have at your disposal the option to also sell the venture, and that means disposing of the venture as a unit. The benefit of this is that, yes, the entity goes, to perhaps one person or multiple persons, but the essence of it is that, as opposed to, say, liquidation, one does not have to be waiting then, for the different assets of the owned by the entity to be sold. It is sold because it is sold as a unit, as one unit. The thing too is that having sold the venture, the entrepreneur is able now to take up new projects. So it may be that the entrepreneur is a serial entrepreneur, for instance, and has his or her eyes on some new entity. The money gained also from the sale can be used in these new ventures. Or it may be that the entrepreneur perhaps just want to take a vacation. There's also employee share ownership plan, ESOP. And let me say too that this is also described as a form of succession. Now, this is where a portion of a company's, the venture's shares are sold to employees. And this it is typically you find that it forms a part of the employee's remuneration package. I know that a lot of large companies that they do this. When they do this too, it actually saves them some money, because it means too that they do not, for instance, let's just say that there is to be a salary increase. They do not need to be paying out live cash to the employees in such a situation. What they would do is that they would just give them X amount of shares. The good thing about it, the benefits, is that yes, it can help to boost staff morale. It will help also to align the employees' interest with that of the companies. Think about it. You have your employees, and now they are part owners of the entity. It means that if the business succeeds, it is going to be in their best interest, and so you find that acts as a catalyst. It acts as a motivator. It acts as a motivating factor to drive them, and so that can, yes, it can help to boost production. Then there is family succession, and with family succession, it is that the management and ownership of the venture actually it transitions to the next generation of family members. Typically, family succession is the result of death, retirement, or illness of the owner. No, there are different types of family succession. So we have testamentary, legal, and irregular successions. Where a testamentary succession is concerned, it is that the owner of the venture, the entrepreneur here, would have most likely made it known who would succeed him or her in the business. This normally it would be defined in something like a will, and of course, which is a legal document. There's also legal succession, and this now is where the nearest living blood relative of this deceased would take over the business. And there is also irregular succession, where the law would come in now to stipulate what would happen. Typically, you may find that this happens in a situation where the entrepreneur dies, without leaving a will, for instance. And you know, the different types, so you have descendant, ascendant, and collateral. Descendants would be, yes, children. Ascendants would be like parents, grandparents, and collaterals would be siblings, nieces, nephews. The benefits of this is there are a lot of pluses. So you have, for instance, where there are family secrets as it relates to the production process, as it relates to a particular ingredient, it can remain in the family, so that can be protected there. It also maintains the family legacy. Then number 7 on the list is that the entrepreneur, you can seek to go public, as in offering shares to the public, and that is referred to as an IPO, and that means initial public offer. Initial public offer, because this would be the first time now that the shares will be, the shares are being offered to the public. Now, when this happens, what it means is that the public, members of the public, now become part owners of the venture. The benefits are quite great. What is most significant is that the entity is able to raise a lot of capital, far more capital than perhaps they would be able to raise on their own. Think too that they do not have to go to a bank to secure a loan, for instance, and bear in mind that will be coming at an interest. So that is a plus there, for the business going public. There is also the potential for greater continuity, because the fact now that it becomes a PLC, a public limited company, which will be owned by the public, there is greater continuity. There is also the possibility of the business now being able to attract more talented and more qualified persons to engage in its operations. And this also may be a strategy to reduce the company's debt or debts. Liquidation. This is number 8 of number 9 on the list. With liquidation, liquidation is somewhat negative, in the sense that typically liquidation takes place when the business is going to be closed, and going to be closed typically because of some financial issues. The company may be bankrupt, for instance. So it is also described as winding up. With liquidation, it is where the assets are converted to cash by them being sold, and it may be that the assets may be sold, or assets may be given to claimants. So looking at creditors here now, the venture owes a creditor or creditors, and so that is why it is being wound up, because they are unable to service their debts, and so they need now to liquidate, to convert to cash, so that they're able to pay these persons who they own, right? The claimants, the creditors. So yes, it leads to a definite closure of the business. The benefits of it is that the assets may be distributed, as I mentioned before. It reduces the pressure of the creditors, so this is a way to get the creditors off your back. And no cost, or the cost to engage in this activity is really quite minimal. Finally, on the list of harvesting strategies is a buyout, and as the name suggests, it is where the venture is bought by a group of persons. There are different types of buyouts. So we have, for instance, a management buyout, and this now is where the management team of this venture approaches the entrepreneur. Hey entrepreneur, we'd like to purchase the business. So when they do that, now they gain control of the assets and the business on a whole. So they are now they would then become the owners of the business. Then we have management buy-in, and this now is where you have managers from outside. You have a management team from outside of the business. So this team now is unrelated to this venture that they're seeking to acquire. So they approach the entrepreneur. Hey, entrepreneur, we would like to purchase the venture. All right, and finally, there is leverage buyout. This typically takes place a lot. So we find that you have an entity that is seeking to purchase the entrepreneurship business venture, and they may not have the amount of money as cash upfront to the purchase, or they may have it but they may want to preserve their cash. So what do? What they do is that they engage, of course, the entrepreneur of the venture they're seeking to purchase in a discussion, and the conversation goes like this: we will purchase your business as follows. We are going to use particular assets in your business as collateral to secure a loan from whichever financial institution, finance house, to do the transaction, and we will give you 50% of the sale value of the business in cash, and we will pay you the balance, which is 10% of the value of the business over the next 5 years. That is an example. All right, so that is what they do. So what when a leverage buyout, it is that the entity that is seeking to do the purchase, or individual, they actually use the assets of the company they are purchasing to leverage the purchase transaction. Okay, so that concludes it there. Let me just say too that where a buyout is concerned, we would have had, for instance, here in the Caribbean, in Jamaica in particular, Leader Mode, which is an entity that makes shoes. Some years ago, it may have been back in, well, not so sure of the year, but quite a number of years ago, the management team had, they bought the business then. Then we would have had Dell, for instance, also Michael Dell, who would have engaged in this to acquire the now Dell company back in 2013. And of course, Quartz Jamaica Limited was acquired by the El Salvadoran company, Cobalt Holding Company, some years ago. And what they did there was to use the assets of Quartz. And based on some research that I did, they mentioned that this was like a first timer, because what the El Salvador company did, that's Cobalt Holdings Company, what they did was to use the entire Quartz fixed and floating assets to secure a loan to purchase the company. So they basically they did not put any money up front to purchase Quartz, right? They use the assets of Quartz to get up to as collateral to get a loan to secure the transaction. That's it. We have come to the end of this presentation. I hope you found it informative. Hope you got value from it, and if you did, please go ahead, hit that like button. Remember to also share the video, subscribe to my channel, please. This will help my channel to grow. And also hit that notification bell so that when I upload a new video, you'll be automatically notified. Until next time, take care.